Well, what I think he did is he camouflaged himself during the Me Too movement. Because if you look at his body of work, there was probably nobody who was more disrespectful, more exploitive to women, to special needs people. He abused them. He put them on the shows. He didn't pay them. He made fun of them. Look what he did to Corey Feldman when he was trying to launch his music career.
Dana Plato.
Yep. He would constantly make fun of and trash people, and then it was a time.
Surreal. But what is this that we're seeing?
I don't know. Is there anything creepier than a guy who looks like a hippie but talks like a Fed? Not for my money.
Have you ever heard a truth so loud it felt like it echoed across the entire internet? That's exactly what happened here. Howard Stern isn't laughing, isn't relaxed, and definitely isn't staying quiet after Tyrus and Tucker Carlson dropped a few unexpected bombs. Tempers rose fast, the usual narrative started cracking, and somewhere in the chaos, someone clearly forgot to hit mute. What exactly was exposed, and why did it strike such a nerve? Grab your popcorn, because this reaction is priceless, and the fallout is even better.
Attention in history class, they'd be like, he's not anything close to Hitler.
Yeah.
There is no other Hitler, hence why we know who Hitler is.
Yeah.
Because there's just an ignorance and it's an arrogance to where I could just say whatever I want to. Then they get caught, and they can't say, I have been wasting network money lying to you.
Last night, 4 years ago, Democrats came up with a new and untested political theory. They could win the White House, their strategists promised, if only they called enough people.
If you're enjoying this, take a second to subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more than you realize. It all starts quietly, and honestly, that's usually how the biggest blow-ups begin. A few comments slip into the public space. Not shouted, not dramatic, just calmly sitting there. And then suddenly, the air feels different. The temperature starts to rise. And a familiar voice reacts like someone just pulled the plug on their last connection to staying relevant.
You could get away with that stuff. Then all of a sudden, people who were doing those things for decades started getting held accountable. And what did Howard do? He turned about face and immediately became so far to the progressive that he found a way to get out from underneath it.
Yeah.
And then he was left with what? His talent. He wasn't able to degrade people anymore. He wasn't able to make fun of people anymore. So he apparently is not that talented. He's just established. So he slides in now and people listen to him. They're like, it's a rich guy talking about how bad.
Howard Stern built his reputation on being untouchable, unbothered, the guy who laughs first and laughs the loudest. But this time, the laugh doesn't come so easily. Because Tyrus and Tucker Carlson didn't show up throwing insults. They brought something much more unsettling. Calm confidence mixed with pure indifference. The kind of energy that makes it seem like they're not even playing the same game anymore.
To live. I want to get out of the house already. I want to go next door and play chess. I want to go take some pictures. This is bull.
So this is a guy who's had every vax available, and he's still hiding in his basement because the vaccine works so well that he can't go out. Right. So when other people disagree, when Aaron Rodgers, for example, the athlete, decided to make his own medical decisions about the vaccine, Howard Stern was enraged. He said Rodgers should be kicked out of the NFL. Socializing is now...
Before anyone could even catch their breath, Tyrus stepped into the conversation with the calm energy of someone who's seen this whole story play out before. Leaning back, completely unimpressed, he shared observations that landed not because they were loud, but because they were obvious, like quietly pointing out the Emperor's missing outfit, and then patiently waiting while everyone else pretends not to notice.
The problem is that we have an elite group of narcissistic morons. So, no, I wish that was a joke, but it's not. They don't, to go on TV every day to objectively talk about something, you have to study, you have to research the pros and cons. And both candidates, you should find things you like, things that concern you. It's called doing work. That's why all the old journalists look so old.
Tucker Carlson follows with that familiar calm that tends to drive critics crazy. A tone that says he's not angry or excited, just mildly amused. Like someone watching a once famous roller coaster slowly rust while the operator keeps insisting it's still the biggest thrill around. Together, they don't really attack, they just pull away the scaffolding that's been holding the myth in place. And once that support is gone, everything starts to wobble. The persona, the legacy, the constant reminders of how bold and edgy everything used to be. Stern's reaction feels less like pure anger and more like betrayal. as if the world broke an unspoken rule to always treat him as the center of the media universe. The surprise isn't that people disagreed with him, it's that they didn't sound nervous doing it. There's a special kind of frustration that shows up when the audience doesn't react on cue, when the applause sign flashes and nobody claps, when the moment lands with a quiet thud instead of fireworks, and suddenly the king of provocation looks confused about why no one is shocked anymore.
There was a lot that was impressive about Howard Stern, for sure, and that bravery allowed him to be creative, but not anymore. Maybe it was the coronavirus that broke him, maybe it was just hormonal changes with middle age. He's now a coward, and his broadcast is about cowardice, amplifying his fears about corona over the air and attacking, more precisely, attacking anybody else who has decided to live life as a free person.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say it's mandatory?
The irony here is hard to miss. The man who built a career pushing everyone else's buttons is now realizing his own buttons are out in the open and surprisingly easy to press. And the more he reacts, the more it feels like watching someone argue with their own reflection and somehow lose. Tyrus keeps things moving forward. No circling back, no repeating the same lines, just stacking one moment after another. Each one quietly weakening the idea that Stern still controls the story. Because control only works when people agree you have it, and that agreement seems to have faded almost overnight. Carlson's role feels like holding up a magnifying glass, not creating problems, just making the ones already there easier to see. He points out contradictions without any extra drama, and that calm delivery hits harder than shouting ever could. What makes the whole situation funny is the imbalance. Stern sounds like he's defending a throne, while the other side sounds like they're simply moving furniture around. No urgency, no panic, just commentary drifting by like clouds that somehow spell the word outdated.
I was 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
You know, like he has nothing to, he's just one of those people that was able to make a lot of money at other people's expense at the time when you were able to do it. And now, this is what he is. They shouldn't cancel him. Let him stay on until he has 10 people listening. Let him bother him that a young woman came along with an idea and her thing. I've never listened to her podcast, but good for her that she's making money. And of course it bothers him because before someone like that, he would bring on his show, degrade her, embarrass.
At some point, the outrage cycle begins. The volume gets louder, the gestures grow bigger, the expressions sharpen, but the effect turns out to be the opposite of what was intended. Instead of looking dominant, it starts to feel fragile. Instead of power, it looks like panic trying to stay cool in a leather jacket. And audiences notice these shifts. They always do. They notice when confidence turns into nostalgia, when rebellion becomes routine, when someone who once broke the rules spends more time reminding people they used to break them. Tucker Carlson doesn't celebrate or gloat, which almost makes it more effective. No victory lap, no chest pounding. Just the calm expression of someone watching a storm pass while holding an umbrella. That restraint lands harder than open mockery. Meanwhile, Tyrus keeps threading the needle, never chasing the reaction, letting silence do most of the work, pauses that feel louder than any speech. And Stern fills those pauses himself, like someone determined not to be ignored, even if it means arguing with empty space. For a moment, the situation feels less like a feud and more like a generational shift happening in real time. The old guard demanding respect while newer voices don't bother asking for permission. They simply keep talking.
Chef. And it's getting very confusing to me. I see what's going on with COVID. Everyone's got it. Everyone's sick. People have 104 fever. I don't want to have 104 fever. I don't want to get sick. So I'm hiding. But everyone else is out running around. I see Oprah's she's having dinner parties.
So the guy was always a narcissist. Obviously, the show was about himself. But again, he had a spirit. He had bravery.
By this point, the jokes practically write themselves. The shock jock is shocked, the disruptor disrupted, and the master of chaos undone by people who refuse to play along, while the audience watches, caught between amusement and secondhand embarrassment. The kind usually reserved for public meltdowns. The lines start to blur as reactions spill into each other. Outrage turns into explanations. Explanations turn into justifications. Justifications turn into a TED Talk nobody asked for. Meanwhile, Tyrus has already moved on to the next point. The funniest part, none of this needed insults. No name calling, no cheap shots, Just commentary delivered with the quiet confidence of people who don't need to convince everyone, only enough people paying attention. Stern's brand has always thrived on being the loudest voice in the room. But the room has changed. The acoustics are different now, and shouting doesn't carry the way it used to. It just sounds like shouting. As the dust settles, a picture becomes clear. This wasn't a traditional takedown. It was a slow deflation, the hiss of air leaving a balloon that once filled a whole parade route. And the story keeps rolling, because reactions invite reactions. The more Stern pushes back, the sharper the contrast becomes. Calm versus chaos, observation versus outrage, and timing versus tantrum. Somewhere in the middle of all this, the audience leans back, smirks, and realizes they're watching something oddly satisfying. Not because anyone is losing, but because the script has flipped. The disruptor is no longer the one directing the disruption.
And stayed up all night checking sources and this, that, whatever. When you get the view who are like, I don't have to think anything. I don't like him, and I'm rich, so you shouldn't like him either. And I can say anything because no one's gonna check me. I surround myself with people. They'll have one puppet Republican who was scared to death to say anything against them, or if she does come out, they'll interrupt her nonstop. So there's this level of stupidity, and it spreads because they don't have to.
The story isn't over yet. The responses keep coming. The tension hangs in the air, and the next move feels like it could drop at any second. In media battles like this, silence can be louder than shouting, and patience can land harder than a punchline. Just when it seems like the moment might fade, Tyrus steps in again. Another comment lands. Another reminder that the spotlight doesn't stay with anyone forever. It moves, often without asking, often without apologizing. And this story, it's still moving, still unfolding, and far from finished. The aftershocks keep spreading. Moments like this don't just end, they echo, bouncing through comment sections, studios, group chats, and anywhere people love watching confidence get tested in public. What's fascinating is how the power balance keeps tilting. Not with dramatic speeches or big announcements, but with subtle shifts, like a spotlight slowly drifting off center while the person in it keeps pretending nothing's changed. Stern doubles down, as anyone would when they feel control slipping away. Louder statements, sharper edges, longer explanations that somehow explain less. The performance grows bigger, while the influence quietly shrinks.
You prostituted yourself out for the woke. Literally, you all did. And then now you're trying to come back and say it was not that? Yeah, it was people like you who refused to tell the truth, tell it like it is. You continue to support an administration that was lying to the American people, and you were fine with it. Now everything went bad, and none of you can say what the real problem is because none of them can look in the mirror. You're the problem, John.
But I appreciate that about the left, and let's leave it alone. Let them live in their ignorance.
Meanwhile, the other side barely even reacts to the escalation, and that might be the biggest sting of all. Nothing frustrates a veteran performer more than realizing the audience's attention has wandered. Tucker stays in that tricky space of calm amusement, the tone of someone who doesn't feel the need to rescue anyone from their own overreactions, just letting moments set until they become awkward enough to collapse on their own. Tyrus keeps his approach steady, which only makes Stern's reactions look even more erratic by comparison. The calm becomes a mirror, reflecting every spike of outrage right back at its source. There's a strange humor in watching someone fight for a version of relevance that no longer exists, swinging its shadows in a media world that has already moved on while they're still polishing their monologue. The sarcasm writes itself now, because reality is already leaning into parody. The outrage sounds like a remix of old controversies, played at full volume but with zero impact. What once felt rebellious now feels scheduled, like rebellion booked neatly between commercial breaks. And with every calm response that refuses to match the intensity, the contrast only grows sharper.
Government censorship, to give the finger to the man. There was a lot that was impressive about Howard Stern, for sure, and that bravery allowed him to be creative, but not anymore. Maybe it was the coronavirus that broke him, maybe it was just hormonal changes with the middle age. He's now a coward, and his broadcast is about cowardice, amplifying his fears about corona over the air and attacking, more precisely, attacking anybody else who's decided to live life as a free person.
The audience notices the desperation disguised as passion, the urgency dressed up as principle, and nothing drains authority faster than someone trying too hard to prove they still have it. Tyrus seems to get this instinctively, letting time do the work. The more someone insists they're unbothered, the more obvious it becomes that they're actually bothered, especially when that insistence ends up as the headline. Tucker's commentary drifts above it all, never chasing validation, never begging for a reaction, which somehow sparks more response than any provocation could. At this point, it feels less like a confrontation and more like a case study. How media power ages, how influence fades, and how being first doesn't guarantee staying relevant. Stern's persona, once built on unpredictability, now feels trapped by predictability. Every reaction lands exactly where expected. Every escalation follows the script the audience has already memorized. The irony deepens as the self-proclaimed rule-breaker becomes the loudest defender of the rules he once thrived on breaking, demanding reverence for his legacy while dismissing anyone else's relevance. Tyrus never takes the bait, leaving it dangling there, looking silly. A quiet reminder that not every challenge deserves a response.
The Democratic Party's not going anywhere because we only have two options.
Yeah.
So even doesn't matter. We've been around forever. Yeah, because both parties do a good job of keeping a third party out.
Right.
So you won't see any. So what they do is every once in a while they change their face. So Democratic Party was overtaken by activists and wannabe terrorists. Because it's funny because and this is the difference between the two parties, when Republicans are losing and being attacked, i.e. when Facebook was taking everything you said.
At this point, Tucker lets the pauses stretch just long enough for the weight of what's being said to sink in. The silence acts like a laugh track no one can switch off. What's happening isn't a takedown by force, it's by contrast. Sharp wit against raw irritation, observation against performance. And the gap keeps growing. The narrative slips further from Stern, not because it's being stolen, but because it no longer needs permission to exist. Every attempt to reclaim control only highlights how much effort it now takes to hold on to what once came effortlessly. And effort kills mystique. The audience notices when someone stops enjoying themselves, when the thrill of provocation turns into a chore, and when the rebel becomes the gatekeeper. Tyrus and Tucker never declare victory. They don't have to. The reactions do it for them. Every outburst only proves their point without a word being spoken. The scene grows more absurd by the minute, like watching someone argue with a clock, begging it to slow down, while it ticks louder and louder. Stern's legacy still looms, but legacy can't save you from how things look right now. And at this moment, the optics, not great.
All hospitals would be closed to you. You're going to go home and die.
So if you don't trust the government, you don't get health care and you should die. So the bigger question is, how did this brave, creative guy become a tool, a craven tool of the powerful, wishing death on his own listeners? There's something sad about this, really sad. Jimmy Dore has watched it happen. He's the host of the Jimmy Dore Show, and we're happy to have him come on tonight. So Jimmy, I'm not even attacking Howard Stern, whom I respect for his talents.
The longer this story goes on, the clearer it becomes that it's not about one comment or one moment. It's about relevance slowly negotiating its own expiration date. Tyrus keeps moving, stacking conversations, letting this moment become just another data point instead of a defining battle. Tucker treats it like an observation worth noting, not a feud worth feeding. That calm restraint keeps paying off. The humor now lies in the inevitability, the slow realization that shouting won't turn back the clock, that cultural influence can't simply be demanded back once it shifts. Stern seems trapped performing for an audience that's already moved on. Still talking, still gesturing, still convinced the room revolves around him. Meanwhile, the room keeps expanding. New voices fill the space, indifferent to old hierarchies, uninterested in nostalgia as a substitute for influence. The story continues not because anyone forces it, but because reactions have momentum. And momentum doesn't care about status. Every new ripple adds another layer, another contrast, another reminder that authority is quieter than it used to be, and relevance has to be earned every day. There's no tidy ending here. No mic drop, no final word, just an ongoing shift that doesn't pause for anyone still clinging to how things used to work. And as the conversation moves forward, unresolved and still simmering, one thing is undeniable. The spotlight has taken on a life of its own.